The number is 24 months. Not a net worth, not $1 million. 24 months of your own fixed expenses, held in something you can reach by Friday. And I'm saying it up front because almost every video on this subject gives you a net worth target. And net worth targets are the reason people making $400,000 a year still lie awake at 3 a.m. doing arithmetic. The Federal Reserve runs a survey every year called the SHED, the Survey of Household Economics and Decision Making. And one of its most cited findings is the share of American adults who could cover a $400 emergency expense with cash. That number has hovered around 63%. What gets less attention is that the anxiety doesn't disappear at the top of the income distribution. It relocates. The person with $2 million invested and 3 months of cash is running the same nervous system as the person with $4,000 in a checking account. Different scale, identical mechanism. So this is not a video about how much you need to retire. This is a video about the structural point where money stops occupying background processing in your brain and why it has almost nothing to do with the size of your portfolio. Hold one image for the rest of this because I'm going to keep returning to it. Think about a thermostat. A thermostat does not stop the weather. It cannot make January warmer. What it does is absorb the swing, so the temperature outside stops being something you personally experience. The weather still happens. It just stops happening to you. Money stress works the same way. Below a certain structural threshold, every financial event reaches you directly. The car repair reaches you. The dental bill reaches you. A bad quarter at work reaches you. You feel the weather because there is nothing between you and it. Above it, those same events still occur. Same frequency, same amounts, but they stop arriving as felt experience. They become line items. The mistake almost everyone makes is trying to solve this by making the house bigger, when the actual fix is installing the thermostat. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you the specific research finding that broke the most famous number in personal finance, the one you've probably heard quoted at dinner parties for a decade, and what replaced it. It reframes this entire question. But first, the math on why the buffer is the load-bearing piece. Say your fixed monthly costs: housing, utilities, insurance, food, transport, minimum debt service, come to $4,200. Not your total spending, your floor, the number below which your life stops functioning. 3 months of that is $12,600, which is the standard emergency fund advice. And it is genuinely useful. It covers a transmission and a root canal in the same quarter. What it does not cover is a job loss. The Bureau of Labor Statistics tracks median duration of unemployment, and in normal, non-recessionary conditions, it sits around 9 to 10 weeks. That sounds like 3 months is fine, but medians hide the tail. The share of unemployed workers out of work 27 weeks or longer regularly runs above 20%, and in a downturn, it climbs sharply. And for higher earning, specialized roles, the search runs systematically longer, because there are fewer such jobs and each takes longer to fill. So the person with a 3-month buffer is covered for the median outcome and exposed to the one that actually matters. And they know it. That's the part people miss. The stress isn't produced by the event. It's produced by the awareness of the exposure, which runs continuously, in the background, whether or not anything is currently going wrong. At $4,200 a month, 24 months is $100,800. Now here's the reversal, and I want you to sit with it because it's the whole video. You think the goal of that $100,800 is to survive 2 years of unemployment? It isn't. Statistically, you will probably never use it that way. The goal of the buffer is to change what you are able to decline. With 3 months of cash, you cannot leave a job that's damaging you. You cannot refuse a bad offer. You cannot wait out a hiring freeze in your field. You take the first thing available, at whatever it pays, because the clock is loud. With 24 months, you can say no. And the ability to say no is what actually removes the stress, not the money itself. The buffer isn't insurance, it's leverage. Let me make this concrete with someone specific. I'm going to call her Dana. She isn't a real person. She's a composite of a pattern I've seen described repeatedly. Dana is 39, earns $118,000, and has $340,000 in retirement accounts. On paper, she is doing extremely well. Top quartile for her age, no consumer debt, contributing steadily. She has $11,000 in cash. Dana is, by any conventional measure, financially successful. And she thinks about money constantly. She checks her balances more than once a day. She has a low-grade dread about her performance review that is disproportionate to any actual risk. Her net worth is high and her thermostat is broken because $340,000 locked in a 401k does nothing for her on a Tuesday when her manager schedules a vague meeting. If Dana redirected $2,000 a month from her taxable investing into cash for roughly 45 months, she'd reach a 24-month buffer. Yes, that cash earns less than the market. At a 4% money market versus a 10% equity return, holding $100,800 in cash instead of stocks costs her roughly $6,000 a year in foregone growth. $6,000 a year to stop thinking about money? I'd take that trade every single time. And the fact that the personal finance internet treats it as a mistake is one of the stranger blind spots in the entire field. There is a whole genre of content optimizing the last 40 basis points of a portfolio for people whose real problem is sleep. Now, the research I promised, because it directly contradicts what you've been told. In 2010, Daniel Kahneman and Angus Deaton published a study that produced the most quoted figure in the history of money and happiness research. Emotional well-being rose with income up to about $75,000 a year, and then flattened. Above that, more money bought life satisfaction, but not day-to-day emotional experience. That finding became gospel. You have heard it repeated 100 times. In 2021, Matthew Killingsworth ran a much larger study using real-time experience sampling and found no plateau at all. Well-being kept rising with income, straight through and well past $75,000. Two respected researchers, opposite conclusions. So in 2023, they did something academia rarely does, an adversarial collaboration, working with Barbara Mellers to find out who was wrong. The answer was that both were partially right, and the resolution is the most useful thing in this video. For roughly the least happy 15 to 20% of people, well-being did plateau. Money stopped helping past a threshold, because their unhappiness was driven by something money doesn't touch. For everyone else, happiness kept climbing with income indefinitely. Read that carefully, because the popular version gets it exactly backwards. The plateau isn't a universal ceiling where money stops mattering. It's a specific pocket where money was never the operative variable, which means the question, how much money before I stop stressing, has a different answer depending on what is actually generating the stress. If the stress is structural, genuine exposure, no buffer, real fragility, then money fixes it, precisely and reliably, and the fix is the thermostat. If the stress is not structural, no balance will resolve it, and every additional dollar is being asked to do a job it cannot do. Most people never distinguish between the two, which is why so many of them hit their number and feel nothing. Which brings me to the second component. Your buffer handles shocks. It does nothing for the low, continuous hum of, am I going to be okay in 30 years? That is a separate anxiety with a separate structural fix, and it is not retire. It's the coast point, the balance at which your existing invested assets, with zero further contributions, grow to your retirement target on their own. The math is simple. At a 7% real return, money doubles roughly every 10 years. If you need $1.5 million at 65 and you're 40, you have 25 years, which is about 2.5 doublings, a multiplier of roughly 5.7. Divide $1.5 million by 5.7, and you get about $263,000. At $263,000 invested at 40, you have already won the retirement question. Everything you contribute after that buys an earlier date or a larger number, but the baseline outcome is secured without you. Dana, at 39 with $340,000, passed her coast point some time ago and has no idea. She is carrying an anxiety she structurally resolved years back because nobody ever told her the finish line existed, let alone that she'd crossed it. The third component is the one people resist most, and it's the ratio that governs everything above. Your fixed costs as a share of take-home pay. Below 50%, every one of these numbers becomes achievable because half your income is available to redirect. Above 70%, the buffer takes a decade to build, and the coast point recedes faster than you approach it. You are running a life with no thermostat and no capacity to install one. This is why two people with identical incomes can have completely different relationships with money, and it has nothing to do with discipline. One of them signed a lease that ate the difference. There's a bleak comedy in the fact that the single most powerful variable here is a decision most people make once, in a hurry, under emotional pressure, in their 20s or 30s, and then live inside for 15 years. So, 3 things to do specifically. First, run the floor calculation, not your budget. Open your statements and add only the costs that continue if your income stops tomorrow. Multiply by 24. That is your number, and it's almost certainly smaller than the net worth target you've carried. Second, calculate your coast point using the doubling math. Target divided by roughly 5.7 at 25 years out, 2.8 at 15 years, 2 at 10 years. Then compare it to what you already have. A meaningful share of people doing this discover they crossed it and kept sprinting. Third, sequence correctly. Buffer to 24 months first, coast point second, optimization last. Almost everyone runs this backwards. They optimize a portfolio for a decade while sitting on 6 weeks of cash, and then wonder why the growing balance never produced the feeling they were told it would. The thermostat is not the biggest thing in the house. It's a small device that costs very little relative to everything around it, and it is the only component that determines whether you feel the weather. 24 months, your coast point, and fixed costs under half. That's the number. It's smaller than you were told, it arrives earlier than you think, and it has little to do with being rich.